Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. In a world where the population is declining and aging, with public infrastructure being larger than ever before, we in OG would tap into the principle of civic duty and utilitarianism to improve the lives of everyone in our society. Proud to propose. Our model will be a couple-fold, 6 points. We will expand the system as per what is now in Singapore. The first point is that this period will be a service period of 2 years that will happen right after high school. You'll spend 6 months in training. After that, by the rest of the duration in actual service. I think this is beneficial for a couple of reasons. The first is that this is beneficial to the process of maturity of the individual. They get to interact with others, contribute to society, and therefore grow better and faster. The second is that this minimizes opportunity cost in terms of opportunity because you haven't found a job, you haven't made active income for yourself. So insofar as this process exists, and that's something that's unlikely to take away from you, but maximally give to society. The third is that in general, I think this is beneficial to the prospects of your own employment, insofar as you're actually getting work experience, you're actually taking on responsibilities and contributing to the nation. It's likely to be the case that you're going to be able to have a slightly easier time finding a job. I think this is particularly important for poor people who are very unlikely to be able to secure, for example, employment like educational opportunities or like break into like internships or whatever else. This gives them that vital capacity to prove to others that they can be in fact a force for good and therefore open up future opportunities for them. The second point is that they will be paid. I think it's great that they will be paid like in full as per like what a civil servant or someone equivalent in their position would like make, even if they're not in national service. If it's the case that the state does not have the budget for this, then we'll pay them as a slightly discounted rate. The third is that I think you have a choice for preference. I mean, obviously, you cannot just do whatever you want, but insofar as you want to see whether is it the case that you're more suitable for the military, the police, or charity, then this is something that we can take into consideration as well. Although at the end of the day, we're going to do it based on like the need of the civil sector. The fourth is that you will also be a part of the reserves insofar as you have gained valuable skills in the future as per the Singapore model. If it's the case that we'll need you to come back, then we'll send you an early notice to provide you that capacity to continue to contribute into the future as well. And that's how we also mitigate against like manpower crunches into the future. The fifth is that I think this is quite important. We will create special term services for skilled personnel. So for example, if you're a doctor or if you're a lawyer, we will allow you to complete education first and then do your term of service later. And this creates a vital pool of very niche professionals that's important to the civil sector because it's likely to be the case that we lack doctors. It's likely to be the case that we lack public defenders. Insofar as we can tap into these individuals to take on this new skill, then I think that's something that's vital for us to expand the civil service to the capacity of those who need it the most. Last is just we'll classify people based on capacity. So obviously, if it's the case that you have a medical condition and then you cannot serve in the military, then you should not be forced to do so. We'll find you something more suitable to do. The purpose of the full process is just to simply plug up vital manpower gap in the public infrastructure. So if it's the case that you have the police, then you alleviate the burden of patrolling. If it's the case that you work at a hospital, then it's likely to be the case that you also alleviate healthcare needs. And it's unlikely to be the case that capacity is a problem, i.e., it's likely to be the case that we can always find you something to do. For example, with immigration and unemployment on the rise, perhaps like crime is an issue. If it's the case that the population is always growing bigger, then bureaucratic demand is always something that we have to accommodate against as well. If it's the case that we're working in the aging population, then healthcare needs is something that's bigger than ever. So it's likely to be the case that we can find you something to do or to alleviate the healthcare costs onto the rest of the sector. The contribution from OG from this point on will be threefold.
Clarification?
The first is we'll explain on civic duty. The second is that we'll talk about utilitarianism. And the third is we'll explain why it's the case that the state will do this well. Before I go on, I'll take one from CO.
Sorry, just clarification. Are you forcing people into particular parts of the civil sector that have more need? Like if the military needs more people, are you forcing them to do that? Or are you giving them options? Like you contradicted yourself in your model.
So we will give them preferences and we will reserve the right to allocate them where they ought to be. I think that's just like a process by which we can compromise the need on both ends. But the priority has to go to the state, and that's our principal stance. So firstly, on civic duty, where does this civic duty to contribute back to the state comes from? It comes from three places. The first is the moral arbitrariness of your position. It's likely to be the case that if it's true that you do not require these services to be urgent, there is just something that is just not as per if it's the case that you don't need this, that's just a position of privilege. It's likely to be the case that a lot of people do rely on these services to get by in education, in defense, for safety, for the police, that protection that offers the community. Insofar as that is true, then just because you don't need it does not mean that you don't have a duty to contribute to it, because like it's just completely nebulous that you're not in that position. The second is that I think arguably for most people in the middle class, you have a privileged position of having enjoyed a public service that was more available when you were born as per later, because in general, on per trend, like cost of living increases and the population decreases. So you are likely working with a shrinking public service as you move along. Insofar as that's true, then I think it's fair to say that because of the fact that you enjoyed one that was previously more robust, you now have to do your job to maintain the robustness of that particular service. The last is, I think, the need for you to participate is important and justified insofar as this is an entity that's created and specifically meant to be operated for the good of the public. So it's not the case that you're like working in finance and nebulously trying to make like millions of dollars and the benefit to society is uncertain. Like these are all infrastructures that were created specifically to uplift the lives of people and cater to specific needs without the incentive of profit maximizing, which means that they're also likely the most accessible as possible, and therefore the contribution for you into these services create like massive externalities in terms of positive impacts. The next is on the metric of utilitarianism. I want to just weigh up the cost of the individual against the benefit to society. I want to look at this through two metrics. The first is externally from the perspective of society. So maybe it's the case that you lose the individual's capacity to contribute economically or to join the workforce for potentially 2 years. But what you get is a 10% increase in demographic labor workforce. This is this massive pool of people that you can use to either like actively staff the needs of the service or to the very least mitigate the cost that runs that service or to increase its efficiency, because if it's the case that there's just more people helping out with the bureaucratic process and like things move faster. The second is externally from the perspective of the individual. So maybe the individual loses at 2 years, but what he gains is all the benefits that we talked about. Why is it the case that it's good for this person to serve when he's young, but beyond that, to live in a society that has little negative externality. Like you have a place for you to place your elderly parents. You know that your security is taken care of because the police is well funded and well staffed, which means that I think like on a comparative, this is quite worth it for you. Lastly, then, on why is the case that the state is likely to do this well? I want to point out two metrics. The first is that I think the government loses a core excuse as to why vital services are underperforming. Insofar as there's enough people, it's then about operational capacities and about governance. They have to take on this legitimacy, take on this accountability. The second is that I think the government gets placed under more scrutiny because participation and insight into this public service now like drastically increased. People know what issues there are. They'll likely vote accordingly and tell people about it. And therefore, the state now has a bigger incentive to look into these things and make sure that things are done right. For all these reasons, please start with opening government.
Thanks for that speech, Leader of Op. Leader of Op.
Sorry, could you repeat?
Yeah, Leader of Op, can you start your speech?
Okay, so like a lot of they said a lot for their policy, and one of the things they said was about how they're gonna allow these people to have a preference for what they actually want to do, but in the end they're still going to prioritize the state. I don't really see how in the long term this will be very effective, because obviously, like, I guess a lot of people, they're going to try to choose what they perceive as like an easier job. So for example, if I'm like a really lazy person, I'm just going to choose something that's like an office job or that kind of thing. So in the end, what happens, even if you do like take their preference into account, it doesn't actually mean a lot of these people will be getting what they actually want, which is also the problem with this entire policy, which is the fact that every person is unique in their own way, which means they have different wants and needs and passions. So when you're basically trying to force them into national service, and even though there's like so many different sectors, there's a very high chance that it might not be something they actually want to do. And when you basically gather a bunch of people that don't like what they're doing and force them to work, they basically have no incentive to do their job well, and because they feel forced, and when they're forced, they just do the bare minimum. They're not gonna try as hard um as someone that went into national service willingly. So when they have no incentive to work hard, it also means that the quality of work they produce will also be a lot lesser, and whatever effects Proc said about, oh, you know, they're gonna do it so well, all that kind of things, it doesn't really stand, because they have no reason to want to do well. They said they will do well because they will see the benefits of having people in national service and all of that. I don't really, a lot of a lot of things like a lot of things that the government do, people would take for granted. They would just be like, oh, this the government did this. They're not really gonna see and like make the link to the whole thing about national service relating to better infrastructure, all that kind of things. So these people, yeah, you are basically taking away their autonomy, because you force them to do something you don't want, just for the sake of society as a whole. We don't think this is okay, because it's just because the individuals matter the most in this debate, because they are basically who makes up society. So when they have to be forced into national service to benefit society, they're also giving a lot away. So I don't think that's a fair trade-off. And what I believe they should be doing, what the government should be doing instead, is encouraging these individuals to join national service on their own. So what this means is that, for example, you could provide more benefits like increasing the salary or allowing more leave time. So or conducting more talks and spreading awareness. All of this actually increases people's interest in national service and allows them to have a better understanding as to what serving the country would look like. So when they have this idea, what they will feel more incentivized to join the national service and actually put out quality work, and essentially the effects on our side will be, the impact on our side will be a lot stronger, because these people actually want to do what they're doing, and because of that they will do a lot better job than those who are being forced. So we also so on our side, we have people that we increase productivity, because now these people have an incentive to work. They have a passion. They feel that they want to actually serve the country. They want to help the state. So when they have these feelings, they would want to work hard, and this would be more beneficial to society as a whole, as to compared to when you force people and they put out low quality work. So the trade-off in this is that there'll be a lot lesser people on our side that are working in national service. But I believe that's still okay, because we are valuing quality over quantity, and we're allowing individuals to decide for themselves whether or not they are suited for national service. So side with opposition.
Thanks for that speech. A reminder to speakers, please ask and take POIs. They are extremely important 1 POI per speech at the very least. Having said that, DPM whenever.
Hi, sorry, am I visible and audible?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Set up the timer. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Sorry, you're very soft. Is that a way you can
Oh,
like?
wait, is this any better or?
That's much better. Thank you.
All right. Okay, then I'll just hold the mic closer. Yeah. All right. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. First, I'll explain why is it that this implementation will be done well. And here is where I'll engage with OO. Second, I'll explain why is it that our bottom line impacts are extremely certain. And lastly, I'll explain why is it our top line impacts on societal benefits is extremely important, um uh especially considering the fact that I'll be explaining when it will be done well. So first on why is it that the national service will be done well. What OO said to engage with us here is to say that people are likely to not enjoy work that they don't want to do, and therefore they will not be very efficient at it, as opposed to if they were able to choose the sort of work that they're able to do. The first thing to point out here is to say that there's no actual tipping point in this particular argument, right? Because there's like even within society, even when you are able to choose the sort of jobs you want to do in the future, there's oftentimes a lot of limitations that happens due to your circumstance or due to your family background. So, for example, it's a lot harder, and there's a lot more structural barriers for example, people who from poorer backgrounds to access stuff like going into medicine, right? So even within society, there's a lot of limited choices as to what you're capable of like choosing to do and what you can enjoy. Which means that like that is even so it's not actually true that you're able to choose like very concretely what you're able to do in society. Even if you're able to choose slightly more, we don't think that that choice is extremely important. uh, which is to say that they're probably able to do their work anyway. The second thing to point out is that people are usually forced into doing work all the time, and even though they are forced to do it and they might not enjoy it, they still recognize, like a lot of times that they still recognize that it's something that must be done. We see this in the case for example education, right? Like a lot of people are forced into like mandatory education at certain levels. Even though they don't enjoy it, they usually recognize that there's some sort of utility to it, and that's the reason why they go through with it and just sort of get it over and done with. And for example, like people who just complete high school and don't pursue higher education, like they usually do recognize the utility of that like earlier education, and that's the reason why they still continue doing it instead of dropping out, for example. Or even if they don't recognize that utility, that's the reason why the state makes it mandatory, right? Because we recognize that that utility is still important to like for people. But more importantly, here is where I explain why is it that it's likely to be done well. So even if people are forced into these positions where they don't enjoy the work that they are doing, we think that it's still important that they do it um precisely because of the impacts that will accrue to them. But before that, I'll explain why is it that this particular system will be done well. So Tan already explained to you why is it, for example, there's some particular some choices in their ability to choose their vocation, but that's um less important as compared to like the utilitarian metric that we explained to you. So it's fairly likely that this system will be done well, but uh because for example of the what he previously told you about like um there being more scrutiny within the public service because everyone is conscripted. But more importantly, we think that this creates an everlasting pool of fresh perspectives because you're forcing new like younger individuals into this system all the time, like literally every single year, which means that there's a lot more opportunity for change here, right? Like there's a lot it's less likely that, for example, this civil service like system will remain as static or as bureaucratic or at least like as fixed and traditional in the past, when you have a lot more new perspectives that come in and are capable of changing the system, precisely because, for example, they later on go on to become full-fledged adults and are capable of voting against these systems that previously might have been inefficient. So what this necessarily means is that by this conscription, we are able to change this system for the better and increase efficiency in this very, very crucial service like civil service sectors that we recognize are very important. But now moving on to the bottom line benefits that we bring to you, right? Like aside from the individual benefits that Thanh already told you, we think that there's definitely a benefit to poor people, or like poor people in general. The reason is because like this just increases their, for example, ability to enter higher education at a point in which they're able to prove to people that they're able to, for example, like do well in this particular sector. So if they were able to prove that they can become like a good field medic, for example. This might increase their ability to get into certain courses. The second thing is that it just increases perspective for these individuals and or increases their capabilities of converting this job into like a full-time job in the future. So we see this quite often within Singapore. Like a lot of individuals who like after the military service like realize that they actually enjoy this, like go on to become full SAF soldiers. And this becomes like a very viable option for a lot of poor individuals who don't have any other option for higher education, for example. This is also especially the case in the light of automation. So for example, within society, oftentimes like jobs that are slightly less skilled, like cashiering or whatever, tends to be the first to be like removed by automation. However, like a lot of these jobs within civil service are are very important because they are the ones that directly serve society's needs, and therefore are very unlike these demands are fairly constant and will not change into the long term. What this then means is that these people who eventually choose to turn their employment from civil service into like an actual job in the future are far more likely to have a very certain job in like that benefits them into the future, as opposed to the nebulous job that might be potentially like replaced within society. Before I move on, POICO.
If working in public services is so good for a certain individual, they'll probably choose to enter it anyways. Why does the government need to make?
So the reason why is because, for example, like a lot of these jobs are just fairly like less glorified. Like for example, like within charities, like we always need like service workers to go around knocking on door to door and help individuals. But this is oftentimes an overlooked part of society because not that many people, for example, might benefit from it. Or at least they don't perceive that they benefit from it because they're not that very lower class of individuals. They don't recognize that their tax dollars are going to paying these people who are helping these people. So it's oftentimes like a underappreciated or a very hard job that people tend not to want to go into. But more importantly, and this leads me very nicely into the societal benefits, right? Because what is empirically true is that if this policy is done well, there's going to be an exponential, like a very, very big increase in the amount of people who are available in the service sector. And what this necessarily means is that there's going to be a lot more people who are able to like serve the needs of individuals. This means like a lot more like people to help your elderly parents in those nursing homes that especially in case of aging populations, for example, which means that like a lot more people are benefited from the fact that they don't have to like take care of their parents, let's say. This means that there's going to be large scale societal benefits that like accrues because of this. And because we explain why this will be implemented well, anything that CG comes out with will be like contingent on this. Therefore, extremely proud to propose.
Thanks for that speech. DLO to conclude top half.
Hi, sorry, we're experiencing a bit of technical.
Sorry, I didn't catch you. I think there was some echo. DLO? Okay. Technical difficulties. Okay, we'll wait for a minute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is it clear?
Yeah, I think there's some background, but it's fine.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll be starting. Oh, first of all, my name is Cheyenne, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'll be taking POIs. Not in the chat. Please voice it. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'll be timing myself. Okay, first of all, I would just like to give you guys my structure. I'll be basically first rebutting a few points that we have. Then after that, I'll be defending and weighing my first speaker. First of all, I noticed that I think your first speaker said that just because you don't need don't need these like skills, doesn't mean you shouldn't contribute. Now, I want you guys to think about it. Have you ever been in a group project? Have you ever been in a group project scenario where there's a person that's been like forced to be in your group and like, or like currently just doesn't enjoy the subject at all and doesn't want to do it? Now those people, right, they will usually like not actually put in like any effort and inevitably like bring down your group. So like these people like doing like these civil services as well as like the charities aren't exactly the best crop of people that you should be entrusting these jobs with. And you also say that of course like the civil services and the charities like are underperforming, which is why we need more people in these sectors to like pick up the slack. However, we don't think that this whole policy is actually like probable, because why would the government take the risk of putting these like people who don't want to do work, people who are like clearly not into it, into helping these people? Like so I believe the second prop said about these people who help, for example, in like old folks' homes. Do you really want to would you want to trust somebody who really not into it to take care of your own grandparents, the grandparents who like are so feeble and like so like vulnerable? Do you want to entrust people who don't really care to like take care of them? Now, so these people that you'll be forcing, of course, will not put in effort and could possibly further ruin the reputation of these civil services and charities, making people like not entrust the government anymore. And yeah, and we think that this wouldn't like happen because the government wouldn't want to take the risk of like an already weak sector for being further looked down upon. As well as another thing that I noticed was, of course, like these the reason why these things are necessary and what benefit it brings to the people is these soft skills. Well, I just want to say like these soft skills, yes, they're useful, but like aren't they like MOE is like so great that like there's many other like areas where these like basic soft skills, like you say education, yeah, there's like in like polys and like also secondary schools and primary schools, we have like a little bit of like soft skills already on like how to deal with these things like effective communication, professional communication, and like a GPA for JCs. And so basically we don't see why this would be like something that would be a main benefit. And also I would like to also rebut the saying that like, oh, the everlasting pool of new info because of the like, oh, more and more people would be involved in these things. Now I would just want to know, how is this already different from status quo? Because like each year there's already like new people, and of course like the system is already changing because of course there are people complaining about it. Of course they have like qualms about how the system is built, which is why this debate exists in the first place. Now you also talk about the about people like people in like impoverished people who like may not have like the facilities to like get into like higher sectors because they don't have like the money to get into like these courses of education to like educate themselves. However, if these people were really so impoverished, do you think they would be able to withstand like the national service, which like has a rule that actually prevents people from actually getting like part-time jobs? And so like this national service would actually be like their only form of income. And also because you say like this is NGOs, right, and non-governmental that don't are non-profits, right? These people who are in these internships, like many other internships, will not be getting paid. So would these impoverished people that you are trying to benefit really be able to sustain being in this situation without like their own like without having to face their own downfall or like having to like take care of the family? Because like these impoverished people like may have to take care of their family. They may need like other like more sources of income. So now I'll be defending our point. So basically right, so basically right, our point, what we want is to give people the choice, because as we know, what we are prioritizing is the quality of the people. Like, yeah, many people are good, but is there any point in many people when all those people aren't like putting in their best effort and people that we want? So basically, because basically we understand that like currently a lot of people, the reason why this debate is because a lot of people think this thing is unfair, because it's initially these national services will not be beneficial to them in any way, or like, and will be essentially like wasting their time, which is why to mitigate those people who feel that way, we would just make it so that the government would just heavily encourage national services for the people who want to take it. So like giving so as my previous speaker said, giving benefits like giving benefits to taking up these internships, like which is and as well as like spreading more awareness through like talks and stuff. So of course, like she said, like we know that it's not really, it's honest. Imagine you are an art student. Imagine being an art student. You're mostly doing practical skills, but you're being forced to do like national service, to like do charity and stuff. Like honestly, right? Because let's say I'm pursuing those kind of fields that like are known to like not generate that much income. Imagine me having to go through these things and delay my career progression, and like and could like give me like less money. Like do you think people would actually like agree to this? Like because another thing that we should take into account that is that like mandating this, forcing people to do something immediately like strikes defiance. People will definitely like disagree. Yeah, we'll disagree, which is why we don't think this is possible. And our side is more important, as we are trying to benefit more people as a whole, as well as benefit the government with more quality, with more like high quality people to benefit these non-thriving sectors, which is the civil service industry as well as the charity industry, which is why I think you should side with opening opposition.
Thanks for that speech. A reminder to speakers, please offer and take POIs. They are very important for engagement. Having said that, member of Gov to start back half.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. Uh, I would like to be addressed as Thai, and I prefer my POI to be in the chat. Yeah. So now I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, panels. In today's debate, I would like to structure my speech by giving rebuttals and following by giving my perspective. So I would like to start off with my rebuttals. So the opposition side has mentioned that our government side is forcing people into national services, charity, or NGO or civil services, and they say that we should instead encourage people to join national services by giving incentive or increase the salary. But in the government side today, is saying that the people might not know that what is the true pictures of the national services or charity or civil services. So now the government side is giving them a chance to actually try out all the things that they might have not tried or might not have know before. So they are giving them a true picture of how the thing looks like. And they are saying that if you are forcing them to work, they might produce a low quality work. And now they're saying that they prefer quality over quantity. But now I'll say that in this case, when there's no quality, when there's no quantity, where no one wants to get into the workforce, then where it comes from, how does it give a quality work? So now the government is trying to tackle the issue by having more quality, and that more people will discover their talent and interest, and therefore they will come to the quality. And also, so the opposition side also say that people are not enjoying their work, so they will not they will not give in everything. And but then if this is the case, and if you give them the chance for them, sorry. Oh, so they are saying that people are not enjoying their work and they should have choose the work that they have enjoyed. But now we're saying that if you never give them the chance to build up their skills, even though they are doing the things that they want, but they have the passionate, but they might not have the skills. So if we are having this program for them, by implementing this, we believe that it gives them a chance to develop their skills, and also it gives them to earn their they have the incentives for them to earn their money. And also they say that the soft skills are developed in education. So why is it that we still want to implement this for them to have their soft skills? So now I'm saying that it is different from the reality when it comes to school settings and in workplace. So in when you are in school settings, people are more lenient to you. They tend to give you a lot of advices, but in the workplace, it's not the same case. And and the opposition side today is being very presumptuous, as they say that all the people know what they want to do right after their high school. As our prime minister has mentioned that this is the program offer for them after their high school. And they say that the opposition side say that people do not get to choose what they want. But I would say that not all people know what they want right after the high school. So if you have the program for them, and uh, it gives them choices to try out what they want after the high school before they get into tertiary education, where they choose where they want to go. And also, with this, they are able to try out more jobs. As in, they will discover their interest, and also it gives them money. It gives them incentives to save some money before entering into tertiary education. While no, not everyone are from privileged background where their parents can afford them into for university. And also, I'd like to add on to our Prime Minister mechanism, where they say that they will have 2 years training after 2 years program. It is a 2 years program after their high school, and now sorry, POI, will say it later. So and it's a 6 month training, and the remaining time will be the proper workplace. And uh, I'd like to say that my add-on to the mechanism is, so it's a 6 month training. So if the people discover that they do not like this sector, for example, now they're in military service and now they realize that they doesn't like military service, probably they can go for something like charity or civil services. So they get to experience other things as well. Okay, so I'll move on to my second argument, where by by implementing this people are able to develop they are able to build up their personal character and skills development, such as they will have better decision making, better critical thinking skills, and solving ability. So why is it important? Because this is to prepare people to face the reality in workplace and also maybe in tertiary structure. And in this period, they are only in the training period, or we can say that as a probation period, where they have more rooms for mistake, and they are here to learn. So people are not so judgmental at this time. And before and with this chance, before they get into the workplace, before if they never try out this work, they will never think that, oh, this is my interest and I'm doing well in this sector. They might think that they like something else, but if they have the chance to try out, they may actually discover their true talents or their potential talents. So this is important, as it will promote lifelong learning for them, and it's also develop resilience, where they are doing things that they are not good now, but uh, they might face challenges and they will need to overcome some challenges, but at last they will get good with this. And also um, Yeah, and also they will. So now I'm saying that in economic state, for in the government side today is saying that for society it's good for economics as the government has more people to get into the workforce, and also when it comes to personal development, now we provide them with skills development where they can enhance their skills and also discover their true interest before getting into tertiary education or getting into the workplace that they want. So that's all from the government side.
Thanks for that speech. A reminder to speakers, please take POIs if they offered, super important for engagement. Having said that, member of op.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
POI is just in the chat. Quickly, a big part of OG's benefits on poor people not being able to access opportunities like internships is out of the round, because if the problem is a lack of opportunities, the state can still give anyone who wants these opportunities volunteer positions in these jobs, and they have incentives to do this because states have aging populations. They want to hire people into public services anyway, so they will give them volunteer opportunities. The question is whether among people who wouldn't otherwise choose these opportunities, if this is justified. TPM's response to this is these jobs aren't glorified, so you need to compel people. Nonsense. Service workers are some of the most glorified jobs on earth. Law enforcement and medical workers and teachers are thought of as heroes. Use your common sense. This benefit of OG is out. I want to first argue that this is a form of unjust coercion weighing against OG's principle on civic duty. There are 3 steps to this argument. Step 1, this policy is uniquely coercive in a massive way, in a way distinct than other obligations the state compels on you like taxes. The starting point is that this is undermining people's autonomy for 2 years of their lives. The job is every day of their lives. It is day in and day out, everything that they think about, all the stresses they have in their lives. On top of which, this undermines their ability to control their future. You're foregoing 2 years of potential earnings in a job that is of your choice by taking the earnings of the state. Note particularly, the compensation of the state is likely to be relatively low. OG's model concedes you're unlikely to have the resources when it's spread thin across every single young person for 2 years in the country. On top of which, the state doesn't have incentives to pay you a ton of money. Why? Because they are forcing you into this job. You have no opportunity to quit. Most people get high wages by bargaining with their employer and telling them they will quit unless you pay them meaningful wages. But the state can physically force you to stay in the job, so it has no incentive to maintain substantial compensation. So you're not being appropriately compensated for your work either, meaning you're being forced into a job that is likely not your best opportunity as far as a job goes. They argue this job at least gives you work experience, but this work experience is not useful for a couple reasons. One, everyone else has this work experience too. The point of work experience is to give workers a competitive advantage in the job market. This doesn't give them a competitive advantage when everyone has the same experience. But second, most people in the world work low-skill jobs. These employers are just not looking for high skill or work experience. They are just looking for company loyalty in something like a factory. Therefore, for the majority of people, having access to this work experience is literally irrelevant because they have to work in things like factories. In this context, you are forcing people to take 2 years out of their lives to work a job. This is uniquely coercive. Second step, coercion is prima facie immoral. Individuals have self-ownership. Unless you spend years, if you spend years of their policy is simple. Unless you spend years of your life working in a job, potentially risking your life, because they could force you to be a soldier, they could force you to be a firefighter. Hence my point of clarification to the PM. The state could force you to put your life in jeopardy for them, and will physically lock you up after kidnapping you by forcing you into a prison unless you do this. This coercion is prima facie immoral. OG's utilitarian metric makes no sense. Why? Utility does not have inherent value. Suffering and happiness are things we ascribe value to because we have a preference against suffering and happiness. The reason we care about those things is because people have chosen to value suffering and happiness. The ultimate terminal thing we value is choice, not just suffering and happiness, not just utility numbers that we weigh against each other. The state is already an incredibly coercive system, and this places additional massive coercion over 2 years of this life. Step 3, no amount of benefit to others justify coercion. There is a concrete right of coercion, and you cannot violate this right or instrumentalize people just to benefit others. What are OG's arguments for why you can? One, they say this is important for people to access other rights, for example, the right to access services. This is not justified. It is unjust to coerce people to do good for others. Why? Because there is an act-omission distinction. It is not justified to violate someone's rights to help someone else because there is a moral distinction between actively violating someone's rights and simply failing to help someone. The state failing to help someone is immoral, but it's much worse for the state to actively violate someone's rights. So a simple thought experiment here. Murder is not the same as failing to donate to a charity that saves a life, because saving a life is a higher moral bar than violating someone's rights. Instrumentalization is wrong. It is wrong to use people as means to an end, to violate their rights to promote the social good by using them as instruments towards social change. Here's a thought experiment. It is unjust to kill you and harvest your organs by merging you, even if that saves 5 people. Here, 5 people's rights might outweigh 1 person's rights, but the point is you are violating the right of a single individual in order to promote benefits to 5 other people, and taking the active decision to violate someone's rights is instrumentalizing them and not treating them as an autonomous individual with rights of their own to promote a benefit. OG's second challenge is you have a civic duty because you benefited from the state's public services, so you have a reciprocal obligation to the state. But the fact that you benefited doesn't create a reciprocal obligation unless you consented to this benefit. People are born into states and state services, but they don't consent to the state. They can vote for governance, but they can't vote for no government to exist, on top of which their votes are constrained by the bundling of different issues, as well as the fact that everyone else is voting in a different way. Here's Nozik's thought experiment here. Imagine there is a radio station that we set up that is played in your house. The fact that it exists and a bunch of people are contributing to it, if the radio station was not explicitly marketed as having a price, means you do not have an obligation to pay for that radio station just because you benefited it. Imagine I came to your house in the middle of the night and painted it red. You don't have an obligation to pay me just because you liked the color unless you explicitly consented to this obligation. But second, you're already paying for this benefit. Your reciprocal obligation is already fulfilled because the state is already coercive to you. It is engaging in aggressive taxation where it is stealing your property in exchange for these services. You are following laws and the state is threatening to lock you up unless it follows these laws. So the state has an obligation to provide services because you are paying for them and following laws in exchange for these services. The third claim from OG is at least the individual gets some benefits, so we have to weigh the rights of individuals against the public. But this benefit is irrelevant. Any potential benefit you receive is just substantially outweighed by the potential harm to you and your individual's rights. The fact that you're benefited unless you consent to that benefit doesn't change anything. Finally, DPM says you already have limited choices in society. That doesn't justify the state restricting your choices even further. Second argument, this policy is incredibly unpopular and drives immense backlash in anti-establishment politics. Step 1, this policy is really unpopular among 2 groups of people. 1, young people. This is viewed as unpopular because it is controlling their lives for 2 years. This is accentuated by opposition media trying to frame the government in a critical way. So overwhelming attention is put to cases like firefighters who lose their lives or police officers who are young people who lose their lives. This is what gets media attention. But 2, it's unpopular among existing government employees who feel like their jobs are being filtered by the entry of a bunch of different people. They become more replaceable, their wages go down. This drives political unrest, substantial spikes of anger leading to protest after protest. This 1, creates investor uncertainty that causes investors to flee. 2, substantially raises risks of violence. And 3, creates adverse political effects. The specific political effect it creates is if there are particular jobs that are state jobs that are viewed as undesirable. For example, firefighters and law enforcement who have to risk their lives. The response of the public will be a substantial increase in political capital to reduce hiring in those jobs, to defund those departments. Because if you defund those departments, they will recruit fewer people out of the conscription service. That means police departments and firefighter departments become defunded and cannot serve the public nearly as well, flipping their claims on benefits to public services. Happy to oppose this incredible form of state coercion.
Thanks for that speech. GovWhip to conclude the case on GovBench.
Am I audible? Or is
Yep.
this better? Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
this is better. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel and members on the floor. Now, at the government bit, I'll just clear up some things and I will structure my speech with some rebuttals as well, going on with the wing and as well as today's tipping point for the government side. Now, firstly, some rebuttals on our end. Firstly, is that in regards towards closing opposition's point, they mentioned that that we are coercing individuals into working and wasting two years of their life. But I'd like to clarify again that we are only risking 2 years of their life to figure out whether these members want or these members to figure out what they want to do in life, which is better than wasting your whole life trying to figure out what you're gonna do with no you don't have a starting point. And if, as mentioned, as closing government's wishes, that if we are taking a soft stance by allowing everybody to have the quote unquote same exposures, because everybody will have the same job experiences when coming out, when this is actually false. Everybody is different, and individuals will have different job experiences or different outcomes or different soft skills acquired after over the 2 years. And just by highlighting that everybody has the same competitive level is actually what government wants. Because guess what, now these people who are impoverished have the same starting line as those who are fulfilled, who are rich in life. And these impoverished people do not have the same means to achieve that same similar starting point as the other rich individuals. And by here we are achieving e- equity rather than equality, equality rather than equality, because at the first
POI.
time is that POI accepted.
Okay, so you said like something about helping to find their passion using this national service, but this isn't like something that's guaranteed, because as we already mentioned in our speech, is that everybody is like different, right? So you can't say for sure that we are helping them find their passion and they are basically a life purpose.
Yeah, got it. Thank you so much. Okay, just want to clarify, as you mentioned already. So technically speaking, you can't really define anybody else's individual experience. So how is it to say that in those 2 years that you're unable to find your own passion? Because in the end, time is different for everybody. And to mention that, it's just like highlighting that, oh, you actually technically don't need to go to high school after primary school, because it's like literally the same. It's forcing on you, it's coercing, it's wasting your time. So now in this case, that we're giving what government here is trying to achieve is that we're providing a play field for these individuals who just graduated on how to mitigate during the workplace, which I think it's a big challenge, not only just for people who study, not it doesn't matter where you come from, what your background, how rich you are, how poor you are, you will still face different issues because you're going to a different phase in life. So in here, government here is not only catering for the individuals, but it's also giving them a safety net for them what to prepare, what to know. Like example, okay, maybe you were coerced into the police department, and as I want to just highlight back the mechanism here, the 2 years period includes a 6 months in training. The details, I won't go into details, but there will be a 6 months into training. So I will highlight that these training will definitely cover soft skills, and I feel like soft skills is being like not really highlighted that much, because soft skills isn't something you learn by the book. It's definitely by something about what you practice and how you actually carry out in life. So who is going to give these people that much of soft skills if you're just only practicing it in the school playfield? And as already clarified by my previous speaker, that they already mentioned that the difference in school and work settings are too different. So coming back to the points that I'll be weighing first is that government here focuses on utilitarianism and quantity, because if there is no quantity, how are you going to find quality, and how are you going to find these people who have passion? So if, let's say, you're going to dismiss somebody because of their choices, but what if like they come into and they do find their passion and they do find that their love towards the national service, which is more likely to happen because there is that exposure, there is that opportunity. And even if you don't, the exposure or the opportunity or the experiences that you gain will be further into your work life, because you know what you like, what you don't like. Maybe you don't like working in customer service, you don't like interacting with people, you're probably going to the IT field. But what if you don't know? Then I'll end up just wasting, I don't know, 5 or 10 more years of my life trying to even mitigate like what do I even want in my life. And government here already covers this issue. They already ensure that you're halfway there, you're almost set, but you already know where to start. And with opposition stance, they're taking a soft stance because they're only highly encouraging people to participate. And with this means people are not likely to even participate. So in this first place, national service will already have a decline, and these services which are likely needed the support of the people of the country are not even likely going to be batted an eye, because in countries where this doesn't exist, people don't really even care or don't even really relate back to the country. They don't really think of that method, that mentality to give back to the country, because it's not important for them. So on opposition side of their world, their people are not even going to prioritize working in government sectors because of how they demonize the government, or how how they think that it's a waste of time, and they're more likely to go overseas or like move to other countries who give that insensitization towards these kind of passions or these type of jobs. Well, in government side here,
we've already mentioned that they will be insensitized, they will be paid a wage. But I feel like being paid a wage is better than none. Example, we're working in the charity for national service. I really highlight that it's a work job. You're not volunteering. So when you're insensitized, you're getting paid. That's different. That's way different from what opposition is trying to paint us in a bad light. They're trying to highlight that we are trying to coerce everybody into the jobs. However, it's just providing them, just like education, it's work-life experience, it's practical, it's going to work. And with this, I've never been prouder to oppose.
Thanks for that speech. Finally calling up Whip to conclude the debate.
Tejas's first extension proves that even if this policy is done in the absolute best way possible, taking the entirety of government bench at its best, it is still an unjust form of government coercion and therefore is never something we should stand for. This argument is round-winning at the point where it beats the government bench at its best and also therefore weighs above opening opposition who's reliant on the government doing this in a bad way. Why is this coercion illegitimate even if a government bench proves that it leads to utilitarian benefits? I think firstly, we explain why you can't compare utility across different people. That is why, even the things that OG says have utility, for example, we want to maximize happiness and minimize suffering, only matter at the point where people have preferences for those things, which means that we should actually be maximizing for people's ability to make their own choices about their life and not coercing them into 2 years of essentially forced labor. But I think secondly, Tejas gives you a lot of intuition pumps for why we don't stand behind instrumentalizing people as a means to an end. For example, the organ thought experiment that he already does. We also just think that in general, you value things outside of utility. You value your agency over your own life. For this reason, we think that this government coercion is incredibly unjust and is not something that we should stand behind. I think Tejas does a really good job proving this. The second extension that he gives to you is simply why this is going to spark massive backlash. That'll have more implications when I get into rebutting the other teams. So with that, I'm going to go team by team explaining why we beat each other team in this debate. Let's start with closing government. I think that the problem with closing government is that the POI that I gave to DPM actually takes out the vast majority of their case, which is, if working in these public sector jobs is so good for individuals, why wouldn't they do this anyways? The vast majority of the CG case is just explaining why this gives individuals access to things like work experience and skills and knowledge about what might be good for them to do later in their life. But if they do want this work experience because they do value the benefits that it provides, I think that they are incredibly likely to go into these jobs anyways if they think it is the best opportunity available to them. I think that everything else we get from CG is just unfortunately pretty derivative of opening government. So with that, I'll give a more comprehensive rebuttal to the government bench arguments we get out of OG. I think, firstly, on the idea of on the idea of benefits to society, we think that the quality of the public services you're giving are actually going to get worse at the point where you have forced conscription into these roles. I think OO gives this claim, but I think I'll make the argument a lot more fully. I think firstly, we just don't think that the people you're bringing in actually have an incentive to do well. OG says that this is true of any job, and I don't think that OO adequately responds to this. But I think that the core difference is that when you have a career, you care about things like you actually do care about your job doing well, even if you were to some extent coerced into having that career because of capitalism. Because you do want to do things like have a higher salary, get promotions, not get fired, etc. I think that all of this applies, for example, to your average job in the private sector where you just work, where you're working towards getting promotions in the future, but it doesn't apply when you just have a 2-year-long period where you're just trying to get the end of it so that you can go do something else. But I think secondly, the people you're pulling in don't have a capacity to do well. We think that even if they get at the 6 months of training, the training is likely to be very bad. Why? I think firstly, you just don't want your best people to be forced into training new people instead of actually going out and making an impact. I think secondly, it just takes a lot of resources to train people really well. And I think thirdly, just like 6 months or even 2.5 years is just too short of a period to train people well. Most people aren't actually great at jobs like these public sector jobs until after they've worked in them for a lot longer. So all of this is to say, I think that this is better reasoning than what OO gave for why the new people you pull in are likely to do the job poorly. Next layer of this argument, which I don't think that OO actually touches upon at all, is that we think that there is a trade-off between having these new people do this job and having like other more skilled people doing it. Why is there a trade-off? I think firstly, in terms of money, I think Tejas explains to you why you are just going to have more money split among you're just going to have the same amount of money split among a larger pool of people because you now need to pay all of the new recruits. This both proves why you're likely to have incredibly low salaries for the people you are forcing into the jobs, especially because there's absolutely zero market competition, but it also means you're likely to need to lower salaries for people who stay in the careers for longer as a result because you have a finite budget. But I think secondly, you're just going to get a lot of backlash from people in these jobs. They aren't going to want to be around a bunch of new graduates who are forced into these jobs. They aren't going to want to be training these new people. So I think that a lot of your skilled workers are just going to be incredibly upset and are going to leave in the first place. All of this, I think, fully takes out the government bench arguments we get at this because on societal benefit, because even if these public services should have a societal benefit, they're just a lot worse at the point where you're conscripting people into doing them. I think that we prove this a lot more fully than opening opposition does. The second core part of the OG claim, which is also the argument that CG goes for, is this idea of like a benefit to individuals. But as we've already explained, we think that individuals are pretty good at making decisions for themselves. If working in public services makes sense for them because they can get money and experience, they're likely to do it. If it doesn't, we think that they should have the ability to pursue like career and educational opportunities elsewhere. We think that this is really, I think that Tejas also touches this on this as well. The last thing that they also have a few other miscellaneous points, like they talk about getting increased scrutiny into government jobs, but I actually think that this is likely to be a bad thing. We think that it's likely to decrease the trust in the government, both because of all of the reasons I already gave as to why the quality is likely to be worse, but also because now people can see like the harms from their peers doing a bad job. They can see that these things aren't actually functioning very well. They're just mad that they need to work in them, and I think that all of this backlash leads to decreased trust, makes people less likely to think that these are ever doing a good job. They're less likely to suggest potential reforms. They're just going to be mad at the reform that government is advocating for. Before I move on, I'll take OG.
Your extension is that national service is immoral, but you don't weigh up this moral burden with the state's duty to solve problems. What's your comparative to our context that public services are inevitably deteriorating with aging and declining population?
So I think firstly, we do explain why the argument on them being immoral outweighs the practical harms we get at the point where we explain that we don't think that you can instrumentalize 2 years of a person's life and essentially force them into labor just so that you can provide services to other people. I think that Tejas does all of this weighing in member, and I repeat it, and I expanded on it a lot at the top of my speech. But secondly, we do think that you have other ways of improving public services. For example, if you spend the money on the skilled people that you already have instead of diluting the money so that the best people you have are leaving. I've also already explained why we think that the quality of public services just gets worse on your side of the house. So even if you do think that the pragmatic impacts matter, we still think that we're winning on those. Really quickly then, why do we weigh above opening opposition? I think firstly, we just do much better rebuttal to opening government, and we explain why even in their best case, where the government does this like in the best way that they can, it's still unjust and still leads to harms and still leads to worse quality of services. But secondly, on their core argument about quality of services, we fill in a key gap because we explain why backlash and reduced salaries mean the existing employees are going to leave the government jobs. So it's not just that you're bringing in new people who are bad, it's that everyone who's good is leaving too. For all of these reasons, we think it's unjust and leads to bad practical outcomes. Very proud to stand on CO.
Thanks for that speech and everybody for a fine debate. You guys can stay here. I'll take about 10 minutes, fill up the ballot, and be back with the OA. Until then, you can virtually cross the floor over, and thanks for the debate. Hi, I'm going to check if all teams are here. Opening government.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Opening opposition.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay. Closing government. Closing government. Okay. CG is here. CO, are you here?
Yeah.
Okay. One sec. I'll just jump to the call straight away and then the justification. We can take questions later. The first went to closing opposition, the second going to opening government, the third going to opening opposition, and an unfortunate fourth going to closing government. CO first, OG second, OO third, CG fourth. I'll start with top half. Opening opposition has two different sets of claims in this debate. The first set of claims that opening opposition has is to say that is the principal claim, which suggests that individuals' choice matters and it should be individuals' interest which should always be prioritized as opposed to society, because choice is something that's generally good for people. And opening opposition suggests that possibly if you don't mandate this, you can still incentivize people in different ways without actually making it compulsory. So for example, you can provide incentives such as increased wages, or you can make people aware about the benefits of these jobs, or the fact that you can incentivize these people to join via natural methods as opposed to unnaturally or like coercively putting them to these jobs, which means that a whole lot of people can be made to realize the benefits of these jobs and these people can join anyways. So opening opposition has a claim about choice in general and the fact that some people who want to really join will join anyways. How does opening government respond? I think the first thing that opening government points out is a response to the COPI, where DPM explains that the reason why there's a need to mandate is because there is a significant portion of the population which also does not like opting into these jobs, considering that these jobs are in society are considered as, say, less paying, because the inherent characterization of service sector jobs is that they just don't have a lot of money attached to them, which means that people are, at least there's some portion of people which is disincentivized as a consequence of realizing that there's just not enough money in this, or at the very least these jobs are not significantly glorified, to which there is no response from opening opposition. The response comes in CO later, which I'll talk about when I talk about CO. The second that opening government does is to explain that the choice principle does not really matter, because there are also other forms of coercion that exist in terms of career opportunities. So if opening opposition's principle is that you are coerced into doing something which you don't like, opening government at DPM also responds by explaining that there are you're often forced by your parents to opt into professions which you don't like, or you are forced into going to school which your parents also like coerce onto you, which you don't like anyways. So opening government is able to explain that the degree to which the choice is constrained on opening opposition is not significant, because there are other ways in which your choice is constrained anyways. The second layer of response that opening government has is the modeling that all of the modeling that Prime Minister has around why there is still some mobility or some degree of choice that you can have within the kind of things that you're doing. So for example, if there is some specialized skill that you have in or you like being a doctor, possibly the government has an incentive to hire you as a doctor. So there's still some degree of choice. So it's unclear whether the system that opening opposition is talking about is a system that is extremely coercive, because at the very least there is still some capacity that you have to choose in terms of what you want to do and what you don't want to do. So opening government then, as a consequence of this, was able to explain that the choice principle is either really marginal or there are just a lot of people who aren't making the choice in status quo anyways. The final thing that opening government does in the principal clash to win this is to explain that the principle of civic duty matters way more. I think this is where there's just a lack of material from opening opposition for what is the exact reason for why individual choice really matters, even if opening opposition does preserve it to some degree. because the claim that comes from opening government is to say that the individual choice or the individual ability to make the choice does not supersede the duty that you have towards citizens in your own country or citizens in your own sovereign. And opening government has a layer of analysis at Prime Minister to explain this. So opening government first says that you have been a beneficiary of these services at some point in time, which means that you also have a reciprocal obligation to people around you who cannot avail these services right now. But secondly, opening government also makes the claim here for why, if you're a middle class person, then you have just been able to realize these benefits way more than an underprivileged person, which means that to create an equitable society, as a middle class person, you should give back. So opening government's analysis for why the principle of civic duty matters is just significantly more, as opposed to opening opposition who don't exactly explain why the principle of individual choice really matters relative to all of the principal claims that come from opening government. So at the end of this first discussion, opening government wins the principal clash because they're able to explain that the principle on choice is at best very marginal. And the second thing they're able to say is that the principle of civic duty matters way more. On the pragmatic, opening opposition's claim on the pragmatic is to say that the quality of government services will go down significantly. The claim that opening opposition just makes here is to say that if you push people into doing something which they don't like at all, then possibly they will become lazy, or at the very least, they will not have the motivation to work for these jobs significantly or in a proper manner because they just don't like these jobs. So the amount of effort that they will put into these jobs is just really marginal. So this might degrade the quality of the jobs or the quality of the work that they're doing. I think the issue really is that it is not exactly clear whether this really causes significant harm in the debate, because opening opposition doesn't really establish a trade-off here, because opening government at Prime Minister itself just explains that the reason why more number of people are generally required in the system is because you want to make the system way more efficient. So the reason why most of these like public service jobs tend to suffer in status quo is because they just don't have enough people. So the reason why bureaucratic red tape exists is because there is just not enough workforce. So if you just have a pump in of a significantly greater number of people, then you can get through the bureaucratic red tape and make the system far more efficient. If that is the case, opening government possibly gets to claim the benefit of just having way more people in the system. And it's not exactly clear whether people being less motivated is a reason for the system to become less efficient, considering that the problem opening government is trying to solve is a problem of reducing bureaucratic inefficiencies as a consequence of pumping in more people. So opening opposition doesn't exactly explain whether people having lesser motivation is a reason enough for them to not do effective work, considering that opening government does explain that the way in which you get this benefit is just by having more people. I think the second thing that opening government does is to actually explain the individual benefit on these specific workers. So the way this interaction works is that opening opposition says that possibly you are not going to get enough benefits because things such as soft skills, and this is responding that comes at DLO. So opening opposition here suggests that if you really want soft skills and if you really want some money, then you should just do other sorts of jobs, and those are just much better. So possibly when you have some agency, then you can choose what you want to do, as opposed to on government bench where you are forced at least for 2 years into something which you don't like at all. So there are other avenues in which you can earn the jobs anyways. I think opening government is able to marginalize this and explain that this is not really significant because you can still get these opportunities on government bench. So opening government has a few claims here. The first thing OG says is the fact that if you do these jobs, then possibly it's good for your employment prospects in the long term because you have gained some work experience. It's not exactly clear from opening opposition whether this is significantly valuable work experience, but opening government also does not do the work in actually explaining how good this experience is in a manner where it is definitively going to guarantee this individual a significant future benefit. But at the very least, OG is able to explain that this is at best symmetric and the work experience argument does not really matter by the end of the top hub interaction. I think the second thing that OG just says is that probably on opposition bench there is a lack of job because automation is rising, which means that there are just not enough jobs in the alternative available. So at the very least, you're employing people right now. So the end impact that opening opposition has in terms of people doing the jobs that they want does not really matter because there are just not enough jobs available. So opening government is able to just marginalize the claim coming from opening opposition at the point at which they are able to explain that the individual benefit onto the people who are being employed or onto the people who are being mandated to work is not that significant on opening opposition. Probably it's just marginally more on OG itself, but OG just wins on the bigger claim of civic duty as the more important principle and the claim on how you can create just a more efficient like public service, like a system of public services way more than opening opposition, because that is the impact that is still unengaged from opening opposition by the end of the top half exchange. That means that's the reason for why OG wins top half. Let's bring closing government into the debate. I think there were, so the one broad concern about the CG case is that a significant portion of it is heavily reliant upon opening government's case. So for example, when CG makes claims about how you can get important skills and they are good for you in the long term, or the fact that, or the fact that you need an opportunity or a platform to develop these skills because these are good platforms, all of this is already present at opening government to some degree, and at no point in closing government is an attempt made to make a distinction between CG and OG, which makes the extension really muddy, and it's not exactly clear what the significant substantive contribution is coming from closing government. I think the additional contribution that CG does have is a layer of responses towards opening opposition, which is useful for their case eventually. So for example, CG first says that a lot of people who come out of high school don't have direction, i.e. they don't exactly know what to do, so they might have a misguided career, or might have misguided, they might have, they don't exactly know what to do, which specifically means that on the comparative, at the very least, if you are put into these sectors, then possibly you might be guided in a better manner. And I think the second thing that closing government does in response is to explain that possibly in school settings, you don't get the kind of advice that you would get in an actual workplace. The third layer of response that CG has is to then probably add some additional material about how this is good for your self-actualization needs because you might be able to realize your fullest potential. So I think these are three layers of responses which end up being the crux of the CG extension. The reason why this is not enough against opening government is because most of this is already reliant upon opening government's case of how individuals get certain skills, and both government teams actually suffer from the same problem of not explaining what these skills exactly are and what are these opportunities available at all. I think the second is just that, it's not something that CG exclusively gets to win on because it's material already present at opening government and CG does not have additional material on it. The second thing I would note is that opening government already has a significantly bigger impact in terms of improving the system of public services and so at best, even if closing government gets to claim the impact of the individual, it's not clear whether this matters significantly more than a significantly greater benefit that opening government achieves in terms of possibly improving the public service sector. I think the third thing that opening government already does is to explain the principle of civic duty, and closing government does not really have any weighing for why the individual's benefit really matter over the tons of benefit coming from opening government beyond the CG case already being heavily reliant upon the premise that already exists on opening government. So I think that's the crux of the reason why CG cannot win the government interaction. The reason why CG does not win over opening opposition is the following. CG's claims, or all three CG's responses, while they might be correct, they are just uncomparative. So the issue is that while it might be the case from CG that possibly you might be able to actualize your potential, or the fact that you can develop the skills that you want, or the fact that you are a misguided person, it's not clear whether the comparative is any better for the groups of people that closing government identifies who are misguided, because possibly these opportunities are still not good for these people. And by opening opposition's claims, if it is the case that it is directly against the interest of these people or against what these people really want, then it possibly means these people will feel even more horrible in the kind of jobs that they are doing. So what is not clear from closing government is that while it might be the case that there are certain problems with opening up opposition's case on these people not knowing what to do, it's not clear how significantly better the comparative is. I think the second is just opening opposition gets to claim the individual impact of some people probably getting more happy when they get to choose what they want to do, as opposed to on closing government where the impact of you developing your skills is not exactly clear whether this is just significantly more important than a degree of satisfaction that people on opening opposition achieve. So I think beyond CG's case being uncomparative, it's not exactly clear. It's also not clear whether the scope of the benefit that CG gets to achieve is more than some amount of happiness that opening opposition achieves for some people. So that's the reason why CG loses to both top half teams. Let's bring closing opposition into the debate. I think CO has two broad levels of contribution. The first level of contribution that CO has is the crux of the principle, which suggests that possibly this degree of coercion or this kind of coercion is super bad. And I think CEO explains this in three different ways. The first thing CEO explains is that the state has a monopoly over you and they have the ability to undermine you whenever you want, so you will have no say in the system. The second thing that CEO explains is that the existence of the choice matters regardless of whether this leads to good or bad outcome, and the way in which people derive happiness is by the fact that they have choice. So even if they end up making misguided choices, it's fine as long as they have the choice. And the third claim that closing opposition makes within the principle is that it's just unfair to instrumentalize people, so you should not use them as a means to an end. This already helps closing opposition win over opening government. because closing opposition at OpWip effectively weighs that this engages with Gov's best case. So even if this might be the case from opening government, that this achieves a significant degree of impact in terms of benefiting a huge number of people, opening or closing opposition suggests that this method of coercion is not justified as long as you are putting people through these specific through really coercive means, and this degree of coercion is just really harmful for an individual as a whole. And I think closing opposition has just some intuition pumps at member itself to explain that the degree of coercion is just significantly more and significantly more harmful than the principal claim that comes from opening government about the principle of civic duty. So while it might be the case that you are fulfilling your civic duty, closing opposition explains that the implication onto your personal agency is just significantly more impactful than the claim that comes from opening government, who are not exactly able to explain whether this significantly, whether the obligation to individuals, to other individuals is just significantly more. So I think on the intensity of who really matters and how significant of an obligation you have to yourself or to other people, closing opposition is able to win on the principle itself. But secondly, I think closing opposition also has a bunch of different pragmatic responses towards opening government to explain that the efficiency that opening government is trying to achieve for the system, or the individual benefits that opening government is trying to achieve for these individuals, don't really materialize ever, which was required from closing opposition to marginalize a significant degree of the benefit coming from opening government. So for example, closing opposition first has two layers of responses for why most individuals who are being mandated by this by the system won't going to be affected won't going to be benefited at all. So I think CO first says that as long as states have limited resources, they are going to be distributed over a greater number of people now, which possibly means that the amount of money that every individual will get will just become much lesser because the state just does not have enough resources. And I think the second thing that closing opposition points out is to say that most of the work that you end up doing on government bench is work that is low skill, which means that you won't be able to get employment opportunities in the future, considering that most employers are looking for high skill work, but also the fact that you don't have any competitive advantage because everybody else is also doing the same jobs at the same time. As long as this is low skill, you don't really have any competitive edge over the people around you. So by the end of this claim, closing opposition is actually able to explain that the kind of opportunities that opening government wants for these people are opportunities that are never going to materialize because these are opportunities that are not valuable at all for the future prospects of these people. The second thing that closing opposition does on the pragmatic is to explain that this also harms the public healthcare system. And I think this is, firstly, I just want to weigh this against opening opposition, because beyond just the principal claim that comes from closing opposition, which actively just actively explains why the personal choice is just significantly more, this already beats opening opposition because just leaves the principle to the extent of explaining that choice is good without actually explaining why this coercion is significant until the case that comes from closing opposition. Beyond that, I think the pragmatic impact that closing opposition has is filling the trade-off, or is actually explaining where the trade-off on reducing the quality of the public service sector actually exists in this debate. Closing opposition explains that when the resources deplete, then it possibly, or per person deplete, then it possibly means that the pre-existing workforce or pre-existing government officers will be disincentivized to join these jobs because they become less attractive, considering that they now have less jobs, which also considering that they now get less wages, and consequently this also means that the political capital to fund these sectors also reduces significantly, which means that the pre-existing workforce now has a disincentive to join or as an incentive to leave, which is bad for maintaining the quality of these sectors. I think this firstly just establishes the trade-off in the debate, because at the end of opening opposition, it is not clear whether there's a trade-off in the debate, but closing opposition actually explains that it harms quality and is able to generate a significantly greater degree of negative utility as opposed to opening opposition. So I think filling the principal gap and explaining what the pragmatic trade-off is already helps CO win over opening opposition. The reason why CO wins over opening government is, first, they were able to explain that the principle of individual choice is way more important because the intensity of coercion is significantly more than the some obligation that you have towards other people. And secondly, explaining that the quality of individuals won't get these attractive opportunities at all, considering that there's a massive problem of no competitive advantage. And thirdly, directly engaging with opening government's metric of actually establishing an effective public healthcare system or a public services sector system because closing opposition actually explains that the quality degrades significantly once the best officers in the system leave. So I think beyond the principal engagement which closing opposition already wins, they're able to explain that possibly on the comparative, the public service sector will be much better when the best officers have an incentive to stay. I would just note that closing opposition does not exactly like scale up how significant of a benefit this is going to be for the public sector in a manner where as long as opening government does explain that the sector suffer from a problem of bureaucratic inefficiencies, but at least I think it's just way more comparative relative to opening government, because CO is able to explain that a significant number of good people do have an incentive to leave, and that's bad. So I think that's the reason why CO wins over OG. Finally, CO versus CG. I think CG explains that you might be misguided, which is like some layer of responding that CG has additionally. The problem is it's just not clear why this is valuable in the debate, because CO's principle already beats this, because CO just says that, so the implicit conclusion of the CO principle is that even if you are misguided, it's fine as long as the choice exists, and it's unfair to artificially take away that choice from people. So closing opposition principle already beats closing government, but also the fact that CO just gets to claim the pragmatic impact in the debate way more than closing government. So it's not clear why a marginal a possibility for individuals to get some skills matters more than a significant benefit that closing opposition gets to achieve in terms of the good quality officers staying or the principal case that CO has. So that's the reasoning why CO wins over everybody else in the debate. If you have questions, you can ask.
Thanks so much. Do you have a way we could reach out to you for feedback? Thanks so much.
Yeah, sure. I'll just drop in my Facebook. You can just probably reach out to me there.
Thank you for the OA. Is it okay if we reach out to you through Facebook?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Sure. Yeah, I've dropped in my Facebook. You can reach out to me here. You can also reach out to me on Discord. I'll just respond. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks so much.
From his Facebook.